video because I just finished running Out of the Abyss, the adventure module for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So it's my first time actually finishing running a published adventure from back to back. So I just thought that there were some interesting insights and things that I learned uh, for running a published adventure, and maybe I just wanted to share them, and maybe it'll be helpful for someone who wants to run uh, future adventure modules from Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. So generally, I would say there are like 7 things that I've learned. Basically, is the first thing is basically just take your time or don't. The second is that it's a framework, not as written. Third is doing a breakdown. Fourth is reading and running. Fifth is doing a pre-prep. Sixth is checking out third-party resources. Fifth is doing a pre-prep. Sixth is checking out third-party resources, and seven is making a pitch. So that's generally that's generally how I summarize the things that I've learned. So we'll get into the first thing. The first thing is to take your time or don't. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, um, I know, especially with the new releases of the new published adventure modules like Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's like the latest thing that comes out from Wizards of the Coast, and we all get this urge to say, oh, I want to buy it, I want to run it for my group and all that. And personally, for me, I would actually advise against running it immediately, like as soon as you get it. Fight the urge to run a published adventure module immediately. That's because for a few reasons. Number one, because adventure modules are generally not written to be plug and play, and this is true. This is true for me even before, when I was running Out of the Abyss, when I was reading previous adventure modules like Red Hand of Doom from 3rd edition. You generally see that adventure modules are not written like you would expect them to be in some cases. So sometimes when you think that adventure modules are like for plug and play, like the moment you buy, you can just flip through it a little bit, glance through a little bit, and then it's ready to play. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't do that, but in most cases, I would say that there is a lot more benefit to doing, to take your time with the module and to go through it a bit more thoroughly before you even decide to run with your group, or maybe even make the decision to even run it at all. There is some benefits to doing a little bit of homework, so to speak, for when you get a new adventure module. And I'm not saying that it's not impossible, because like Jeremy Crawford himself is like, he gives some suggestions about how to run adventure modules almost immediately, but he also does give his own suggestions, something like I remember, if I recall, it's something like read all the stat blocks, get a hang of what the general plot is, and I think there's something about NPCs. So yeah, I can get that if speed is really what you're going for when you're buying adventure modules, but like for me, especially after I run all the Abyss, I generally learned that try to enjoy taking your time with the adventure module before running it. And the upside for taking your time, especially, is that generally you want to you know make it your money's worth when you're buying an adventure module, especially if you're the kind of DM who buys all the books by himself on his own pocket, out of his own pocket. And you don't and you is most of the usually you only have like a one chance with that adventure module with your group, and if your group didn't enjoy it, or it had or you and the group, or your group had different expectations about the module, then I think it's a shame sometimes that you never decide to run the adventure module again, or you decide to stop the adventure halfway because the adventure module just didn't suit what you were expecting. So that's why I say, like, it's better to just take your time, go through it, and the general advice you will usually hear from most people when they say about running adventure modules is always read from cover to cover, and then read it again from cover to cover, which I'll get into a bit more detail into that sort of mentality, which is something that I generally don't think is as literal as that, but yeah. even the general advice would just general advice would be just take your time to to read through the whole adventure module at least twice or once or twice before you commit yourself and your group to playing it and running it. But having said that, it is understandable, sometimes like especially when like new adventure modules just came out and then the group has been expecting it to play it, and they want to play as soon as possible. But I would still recommend, like, if let's say time is of the essence, like your group is really really hyped up about it and you really want to run it as soon as possible, but you still want to like control some time more module first before start playing, is to give yourself a deadline. So this is generally to give yourself like a time frame of how much you can cover and how much you can take your time, how much you can do some prep work with the adventure module itself before you dedicate yourself to the group. So I would generally, I mean, it depends really how long your group allows you to take this kind of time. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month. Generally, I think I would take a bit longer considering how much time I have to do prep and how much time I want to like just totally ingest myself into the group, into the module. Generally, maybe another way you can buy yourself a little bit of time is sometimes like if your group is currently running a campaign or playing in another module, and a new module has just came out, so you're gonna have some time in between finishing the current module that you're running and then finishing up reading the new module that you just bought or you plan to run soon. So that's the first point, is to make a decision whether you want to take your time with the module or don't. There's two ways you can go about it. If you don't, give yourself a deadline. If you can afford one. If you can't, be prepared to say that the adventure module is not going to be written to be plug and play immediately. Like you can't read the text, you can't read the information, you can't read the details as you go along during play, because it's going to drag down pacing unless that's what your group do, unless your group doesn't really mind that. But I in my experience, that's not what I would consider a good session for me, even as a player or as a DM, that I don't want to drag the pace out because I have to read like 5 pages or just about the information of that one encounter or that one location. So on the flip side, which is definitely to take more time, give yourself the luxury of time to go through the module, do some prep, do some advanced prep, and which I'll get into later on, like what sort of advanced prep can you do with that given time. But I would definitely try to give myself that time for myself to do all that work, to do all that homework, if you call it, when you get a new adventure module. I'll never expect an adventure module from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast to be like a computer game, like you just buy off the box, install it, and you're ready to go. No, that's not how that's probably not how it really works, like in the sense that that's not really the right expectation to set for myself. So yeah, I definitely going to be giving myself a bit more time when I buy myself a new adventure module. Which brings me to my second point, which is adventure modules, as written, especially when I was reading Out the Abyss, they give you that impression that just run it by the chapters as they are organized by, or they are sorted by, and you're generally on the right path, so to speak, in the sense that this is how the designers intended the module to be run, and if you take it through, your players, they would generally have the same experience as the experience that the designers intended. But for me, after I've ran Out the Abyss with my group, I learned to accept that when you get yourself an adventure module, you are going to do some work, and one main reason for that is because you're going to find a lot of things, what I would call empty spaces. There will be adventure modules, especially Dungeons and Dragons adventure modules, are not really written to be very thorough. So whether that's intentional, well, that's probably intentional in the sense that because it's very difficult to cover everything in 200 to 300 pages. Even like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I heard covers about 350 pages, and it only covers a very small amount of Undermountain. So try to set your expectations that when you buy an adventure module, you are very, very likely to find places that may interest you or your group, but there is just not enough information to go on. And maybe those are places that where your intuition comes in to fill in the blanks, like to get that's your empty canvas to do whatever you want with it, and maybe throw some new ideas that you want to use on your group or for the adventure. So by saying that basically when you get yourself as a published adventure module, look at it as a framework. Look at it as not as an adventure module to run from A to Z, but as a framework for what's already being pre-built, and then there's a lot of places for you to insert your own ideas as well. So what Another thing I would say, like, once you get into the mindset that published adventure modules are a framework, and there's a lot of empty spaces as well as some pre-built places, is that you have to come to make a decision at yourself as a DM to know at which point in the adventure you are ready to go off book. And what I mean off book is that maybe like in Out the Abyss, there was this idea where that the players were supposed to escape from the Underdark, and there was an entrance, there was an exit way that the players were supposed to find. So the book itself never really specifies where the exit point is, but in the subsequent areas to reach there, there were like many cities along the Underdark that the players can travel with. So these are the places where the DA has to make a decision, in the sense that if I go off book, do I put that exit of the Underdark in one of those cities, or or maybe literally somewhere in the middle of the Underdark, or do I follow the book and make the players have to go through each of the cities before they eventually find the exit? So it's the reason for why you want to give yourself the space to decide where you want to go off book, is that because sometimes there could be a lot of certain restrictions or limitations or circumstances that your group may face. For example, like for my group, we decided that when we wanted to run Out the Abyss, we tried to limit at least the first half of the book to only 10 sessions. So I only had 10 sessions to work with, which is approximately about 4 to 8 hours per session, and I had to try to play around with what was set in the adventure book, and try to see if I can fit all of that within 10 sessions or I cannot. And the important thing, I felt that if you see it as a framework, it's easier for the DM to accept themselves that, okay, it's all right for me to not follow whatever the book says. Pretty much like you would say for rules, but in this case, that you have to be able to accept and adjust adventure modules for your group's needs. And there are definitely circumstances that the adventure module would never be able to cover. So this is where the DM comes in to customize the adventure to suit the player's needs. It could be like different kinds of needs. It could be like play style needs, could be commitment needs, could be timing needs, could be rules needs, for all this sort of things. So once you accept that adventure modules are more of a framework rather than something to go through as written, then you give yourself a lot of space to make a lot of adjustments, and you also start to identify the points and areas where you think like, okay, this doesn't feel right for my group, even though it's written that way. So that's why and you're willing to change it for your group. So my third point is do a breakdown. Now, I would like to liken, like after my experience running Out the Abyss, I would like to liken published adventures like you would a movie script. Sorry. And the first things that after a screenwriter has finished writing a script, and they pass it to like a director or a producer, actually when it gets the green light to go and we're going to make a movie, the first few things that they do, which is considered like called a pre-production, is they do a breakdown. And I think that's a very good practice to do as well with published adventure modules. Think of it as a script provided to you, which is also not a complete script in a sense, because it's, like I say, it's a framework. But when you when you start reading a published adventure module, and you think of it like a script, and when you get the script, you do the breakdown. And what do I mean by a breakdown? Breakdown is just trying to identify the moving parts within the adventure module itself slash script. And you know, in the movie business, it's like when they do a breakdown, they're actually looking for things like, okay, what sort of actors do we need, what sort of locations do we need, what sort of props do we need, and then they'll start like calculating the cost from there, which you can do a very similar practice with published adventure modules. When you get the adventure module, start identifying the important things that make up adventure. Now, what sort of things they can make up adventure? For me, especially when I started reading Out the Abyss, and it's a very universal thing, in I would say, in generally, at least in most of D&D 5e adventure modules. You need to look for things like locations. You need to look for things like what are the NPCs involved. You need to look for things like what are the special items. Usually, like, quest items, or central items. It could be like, I don't know, like in Dragon Heist, I believe it was the stone where the guy who possesses it, and then he has to, you have to find the stone to find the vault or something like that. That sort of thing. Uh, you have to identify the monsters. What are the monsters that are mentioned? So this is where it falls into the Jeremy Crawford advice. Things that you need to know the monsters, and you need to know the stat blocks. And stat blocks is one thing in the mechanical sense, but monsters is also very important to know, is because that you that's where you start flipping through the monster manual, and or whatever book they're in, and you start reading up their lore and how they behave, and sort of this description about the monster. And that's already going to add flavor to the adventure module that may not be as presented on that may not be presented obviously on the book. uh, then you also have like things like encounters, like key encounters, like the pivotal uh, encounters and scenes within the adventure, or sometimes even like big set piece encounters, major combats, uh, major major set pieces, for example, like a chase and an escape, that you need to read ahead, know what the objective is, and then try to understand how the adventure module suggests you to run that particular encounters. Plot. Now, this is something that it's a luxury for published adventure modules, because they are mostly supposed to have like a general plot line, and prior to, I think, Storm King's Thunder, the hard part was that you had to read the whole book cover to cover to understand what was the whole plot of the adventure was. So like, Hall of the Dragon Queen was about it was about following the hoard that was collected, and then finding out where it goes to. Out of the Abyss is obviously escaping the abyss, and then finding out, and then going back to the abyss to find out who summoned the demon lords into the Underdark. And Dragon Heist, I would presume the plot is to find out where the vault is and who's trying to get the money. Uh, Tomb of Annihilation has an interesting starting plot. It's like souls people that die, and then their souls just sort of like never return, and they cannot be resurrected. So in Storm prior to Storm King's Thunder, or you had to read the whole book to find out the plot. But in Storm King's Thunder, they started having these flow charts. And I think even like Tomb of Annihilation and all that, they started having these flow charts. So at least they make the plot easier to follow. Like, you kind of know where head and tail is, but you still need to read. You still need to break down the plot into its main plot points of at which chapter, which certain part of the plot is revealed or developed as it goes. Treasures and rewards. That's also one part you need to break down, because that's to help you manage the amount of gold, amount of magic items sometimes that the players will be getting throughout the adventure. Also, once you do a breakdown of these things, especially for treasures, you can sort of like move them around to say like, okay, if the PCs never reach a certain location, or they never finish a certain quest, then do they deserve to get that magical item which would have been somewhere else if they didn't do it? So by understanding what the rewards and magic items that are involved, breaking down the items and magic rewards according to chapter as you read along, uh, you can sort of understand and expect what sort of power level the players are about to go. For example, like when I was running Out the Abyss, there was this magical sword they could optionally find. It was never stated as a must or part of the plot. which was basically just like a shining sword that just emanates daylight. So if I had not known about the sword in advance, and I just that was it was actually part of the treasure of looting a tomb, uh, then my players may not have stumbled upon it, or I may not have like read it and said that, okay, this is not exactly what my players would appreciate, or they would think would be useful to them, and that they would think the magic item was worthless for the trouble that they had to go through for the tomb. So I had to change what the sword did in the end. So that's also just one some important things, like what you can get out of when you do a breakdown of magical items and rewards. Uh, so, and after you have all the breakdown of all these locations, like what are the kind of locations that were involved, especially like things like terrains on dungeons, NPCs, important people to talk to, who has information of what, who is related to how, to whoever, what your motivations, that sort of thing. Once you have a breakdown of all this, try to list them, put them somewhere in the list. Could be a Microsoft Word document, could be Evernote somewhere. But the whole point of doing the breakdown as that will be very very useful to you, not only just to draw out the big picture, but it'll be very very useful to you when you start to do prep, when you start prepping session by session for your group, because you want to put it in a way that it's very organized and very easy to search and sort for whatever information that you need for the next for the first session and the subsequent sessions that follow. For example, like when I was running out of the abyss, when they were going into a certain underdark city, then immediately I could just go through my breakdowns and say, okay, in this particular city, who are the major NPCs, what were the major items already there, what are the main encounters that are going to be there, how is this city important to the plot, how does it move, and what treasures the players can expect to find within that city itself. So yeah, and this is actually something very interesting to do for published adventure modules for 5e, because when you start doing all these breakdowns, that's where you will see the empty spaces. That's where you will see that, okay, you expected players to find certain things in a particular area, but it was never stated. So that's where you start thinking you start asking yourself, should I put something a bit more interesting than what the book has already written? And then you look through the list of treasures and you say, yeah, maybe the treasure that they get out of the whole experience was lackluster. So just change it. Just change it, or or try to, or if you're so insistent that the treasure that they get was what they deserve, then just stick with it. So that's why the breakdowns are very very important, and actually very very useful in my opinion, when I started doing it. Personally, my way of doing when I do these breakdowns, I try to put it into a wiki. Uh, Although my wikis are sometimes a bit convoluted, and sometimes they do hinder me in my prep. But I'm definitely trying to find a better way to it's more of a matter of organization rather than doing the breakdown itself. So breakdowns are actually very very useful. Now my next point would be reading and running. Okay, now the advice would be, when you are reading the adventure module, and the advice is, okay, reading, you read it and you understand, and understand what it says, and you understand all the how the adventure is supposed to go, but sometimes something that makes sense when you're reading it may not make sense when you're running it. So you have to there is a very fast distinction between the two, reading and running. It's easier to read and understand something, but it's very very difficult to run the same thing and then try to deliver or express the same ideas that what you've read. And sometimes when I was reading Out of the Abyss, or and some of the published adventure modules, is that they tell you what you need to know, but they don't tell you how to share that information, and sometimes it can lead to very anticlimactic or very boring expositions, because as a DM, sometimes you just never you've never figured out that was an important piece of information that the players were supposed to have. Then the only best way you could do is just throw in an exposition, and expositions can be, once overused, can be actually pretty boring. So it's actually quite important for DMs to recognize that what after they've what they read, and after they've read it, they have to think of ways of how they want to share that information, how they want to deliver that information to the players. So the challenge is to relay the information that you've read. And in some cases, sometimes it's just a matter of controlling the flow of information. Whether do you use expositions, whether do you use like a NPC interaction, whether do you use a quest to make a point. So it's very important for DMs, especially when they are reading adventure modules, is to understand sometimes what they are reading right now is will be a challenge uh, when trying to turn it into digestible information to the players. How are you going to run this particular information that you just read? And that's actually a pretty big challenge sometimes. So, but the first step is always to be aware of it in the first place. What you read and how what you read is one thing. How are you going to run it is the next question you should be asking yourself after you've read it. Okay. My next point is which is really I decide to commit myself to run the game, which is something I will call something like I will at this stage call it a pre-prep. Like prepping the session is usually done when you've already started the adventure, and you're just prepping it week by week, session by session, and just to see what's gonna like just to prepare for the next game. But pre-prep for me is doing all the necessary prep for the adventure that is not tied to the actions of the PCs from prior adventures or the first session. And there are actually quite a number of things you can do pre-prep before you start running the game. So I've already mentioned the breakdowns, what are the things you're looking for, and what your things you're breaking down into, and those are the things that would be the things that you want to prep for in advance, way before you start running the first session. Uh, for example, like okay, you have locations, you have NPCs, you have all that. Now, uh, what I mean by pre-prep is prepping for things that will take time, but does not add any kind of value when you're prepping for a session. What kind of things? We can talk it's be things like images. If you read a location, you need to find like an image, or especially NPC portraits. Don't spend your time looking for NPC portraits when you're prepping for a session. There are already different things to prep for a session, rather than going on Pinterest, going on Google, going on DeviantArt to find the perfect picture for the NPC. You can already start looking for images for the NPC because you've already done a breakdown. You already know this NPC exists, and you already need a picture for him, and just do it right now before you start running the session. So images is definitely one major example. Takes a lot of time out of prepping, and definitely you want to do this like way in advance. Um, Another thing, if you're the kind of DM, music, soundtracks. If you need to, if you're the kind of DM who wants to improve immersion using music, yeah, going through a library of music, whether on Spotify or your own personal collection, yeah, these are the things you can pre-prep way in advance, and you can even like try to try to find the kind of music that you think would be very suitable to the adventure module, and try to get those out already. uh, Other than music, props, handouts, if there are certain props, certain handouts that need or certain handouts or certain like cheat sheets, reference sheets that would make your game, that would make you and your players life easier, yeah, do those way in advance. Like in Dragon Heist, they have this thing called the code legal, which is basically like the laws of the city. So if I'm not mistaken, in the book somewhere they actually have like they have an actual handout of the what entails in the code legal. And in they were selling the part of Dragon Heist out like separately from the main book itself. Yeah, those are the things you can do way in advance. Like you don't need to wait for the first session to begin to find all those kind of things. Props, especially, like if you're kind of if you already have the time to do some work before the first session, yeah, why not build some props? Why not make some of the props of like the items that were mentioned inside the adventure module? And you already know this from the breakdown already. like the one from Dragon Heist, where there's that special stone. Like if you know someone who's good at making props, then why not just commission that out and get it before the adventure starts. Another important thing that most people may underestimate is maps. um, Five Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast has they are very good at putting the maps inside the adventure module, but they're not necessarily very good at providing the map that would be very very useful on the table. Usually, most people they have to like either photostate the map out from the book, and then they have to like zoom it out, enlarge it, and then it comes onto like pixelated scales, and then had to do like a lot of work just to modify the things. Or sometimes you have to go and buy the digital versions of the maps from the cartographers themselves. So yeah, definitely go out and source for the maps way in advance, because you already know what places need maps. And in some cases, sometimes out the abyss, there were many locations there were no maps, and I definitely fell into that trap with that when I didn't prep for maps. That they were in locations that I sort of like had to make up as I go, uh, and if I knew that they each locate of the locations that I have, I would definitely have like went out to find maps for them, or make up as I go, or make them up before I started running the campaign. Um, Descriptions. Now, this is something notorious, very notorious for Dungeons and Dragons 5e. The descriptions are present, but some of them are really, really very plain and very lackluster. So they have box text, and to be honest, I've used some of their box text, and I've really never liked them, because number one, they are either they don't really invoke the right kind of immersion. Number two, they don't give out the right kind of information, especially for the DM sometimes, because like I said, reading and running and delivering the impact is totally different. And the box texts are sometimes, even reading them themselves, like doesn't give me a lot of information to go by. I and you definitely benefit from spending more time trying to write it in a certain way that will be more easy on the tongue for you, especially if you're reading out block by block. Or you know try to sometimes the extra information that you need, or that the players need, is not within the description box. It's not in the block tag itself, but it's within somewhere in the descriptions. So most of the time I find myself like wanting to rewrite the block text, because it's like some of the information that were in the descriptions would have easily been very very important, or very 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 straightforward, that the players would ask, and should just, if they heard it for the first time, they would have never asked some of the questions already. So take so definitely, after breaking down and you read the box text, and if it doesn't suit you and you think it needs to rewrite, do all this like way way in advance. You don't need to wait until you start running the adventure to do them. uh, Pieces of lore. Now, published adventure has the benefit where, in the sense that uh, they would generally give you the pieces of lore that you need. Lore as in like setting information, setting lore that you would need to run uh, the adventure. Now, I say generally because sometimes the information, the depth of the lore that they give you is mostly quite superficial. Sometimes not even helpful enough to make a point. So therefore, you would if you're trying to be a bit more immersive, or you're trying to make players feel more like they're in the real world, then uh, lore seeking is definitely going to be like a very big part of running published adventure modules. Because, for example, like Out of the Abyss, it's in the Underdark, so you have to know the whole Underdark ecology of how things works there, how survival works there, and there are so many prior editions, supplements talking about Underdark. So there's actually a lot of reading materials sometimes you have to go through, and you definitely don't want to start going through reading materials while you're in the middle of preparing for the next session in the campaign. These are the kind of homework and reading that you should be doing way in advance. The moment you do your breakdown, you say, okay, there's an Underdark location. What do I need to know about Underdark? Is the information is provided inside the book that I read is enough. Because sometimes once you read it, then you find out that, okay, that's easy to know from reading, but can I run it with that information? If you can't, then you need to go looking for lore, for more in-depth information. So definitely spend some, especially published adventure modules, if they are certain points that are very pivotal, that heavily relies on pieces of lore, definitely go spend the time and effort to go find the pieces of lore that you need to run, not necessarily just to read. uh, Rules, now mechanics, basically, like out the abyss, straight up, you have to understand the whole light and darkness mechanics. You have to understand traveling mechanics. You have to understand the hunger mechanics, water, food, all these mechanics. uh, these are the things that you should already identify, what kind of rules you need to read up, what kind of rules you need to understand way in advance. um, some and the thing is, especially like if you're not, if I wasn't running out the abyss, I was running like Hall of the Dragon Queen. Most the probably the only rules that I would probably need to understand were maybe the flying rules, especially as well as the traveling rules. But because I was running out the abyss in the Underdark, there were a bit more rules that I needed to read up. And this is actually useful in the sense to know in advance, because in the sense that uh, unless when you're a new DM and you don't have an encyclopedia knowledge on the rules yet, these are the places where you kind of it pinpoints you to where which part of the sections of the rules that are very important to you at that moment for the adventure. So you sort of like learn the rules as you go along, and you know, especially rules, they are usually pace breakers. You don't want to like read up on what the rules says for to do certain things while you're in the middle of adventure, or even while you're preparing for the next session, because reading rules sometimes can be as tedious as well as lore, because the rules runs is the mechanics that runs the game. uh, so after these are all the things, like lore rules, these all things form what you would call something like a reading list, or appendix N. But appendix N is also something that it's not exactly like the things that you must read, but but there are also like things like references and inspirations that you can find. Like when I was going through Out the Abyss, my appendix N involved things like the Drizzt novels. These are the things that just to help you build up some, just to stir your brain a little bit, to build up some ideas for you, and give you inspirations, like, or like in the Drizzt novels, especially the parts, the trilogy when he was about his birth all the way until his exile from the Underdark. Those things were actually very helpful to me when I was running the first half of the Audi Abyss, because it goes through that whole you can sort of try to mirror Drizzt's journey together with the party's journey, if you could run on that. And even things like when Out of the Abyss, they mention specific inspirations for the adventure, like Alice in Wonderland. So that kind of thing just falls into your appendix N. And these are the things that I would say, like, it's really good to have, but not very important. But that's why, if you have, depending on how much time you have before you start running the adventure, these are the things that you can do way in advance. So it's mostly about sourcing the things that you need: pictures, music, props, handouts, maps, uh, doing some extra work like descriptions, and then doing up the proper reading, rules, lore, and references and so on. Now the next point, so after you do the so after the pre-prep, some of the things that you could also do. This one falls very closely with what I just mentioned about pre-prep, which is to find more resources, especially third-party resources for D&D 5e. So there is the Dungeon Masters Guild, if you don't already know them, and the DMG is the Dungeon Masters Guild is very, very efficient in terms of making products, uh, sometimes even prior to the release of an adventure module. And this is where you have to take a lot of time to sort through what's going to be useful for you, what's going to be not. And most of the time, some of the products that I've released from the Dungeon Masters Guild is very supplementary to the official module itself. So Out of the Abyss had a couple of like guides, and also like encounter books that help fill in a lot of like blank spaces that was already in the published adventure. And I've already seen a few for like Dragon Heist, and I'm not surprised you're going to see a few from Mad Mage. So if you're decided to run an adventure module, and you have a little bit of time, and you're you're a little bit lazy or can't afford to do some of the pre-prep work, then definitely go, go through the Dungeon Masters Guild to look for that particular adventure module, and you're probably going to get like quite a few products that could help you in that way, in that regard. Um, and also try to look for resources and for like people who could help you. Uh, one common place that I always go to look for when I start running published adventure modules is to go on Facebook, and you probably can find a Facebook group for DMs of that adventure module. So I for Out of the Abyss, I found a Out of the Abyss DMs group, and just join, and start that's and you've already connected with people who've shared same experiences with you, and you can talk about it with them, and throw ideas around and see, bounce ideas with each other. And Facebook is not just the only place. I mean, like, there's also Reddit, and Reddit also sometimes they have a subreddit for that particular adventure module, so you can go in there and just participate yourself as well. And another place that you can also like meet with people is also forums. I don't use forums as much as I used to, but if there were places that I would go, N World is definitely one I think that's still surviving to this day. Maybe the giants in the playground. Maybe if I'm not sure how the 5e crowd is there, but yeah, definitely there are forums that you can join, and if they have a particular thread for that adventure module, all the better. Then you can just join that particular thread, and just start posting and start talking to people about having their experiences or having their thoughts about certain parts of the adventure module. So uh, always there is an availability of third-party resources outside the adventure module itself. So definitely worth checking out. Definitely worth looking around for those kind of things to help you. And my last point is, after you've done all the all the things beforehand, or the pre-prep, or the breakdown, everything, you start to get an idea of what the adventure module is really about, or is it really for you, or how do you want to make the adventure module for your group. So one final exercise that I wish I had done, and I will probably do in subsequent times when I do the future adventure modules, is to gather all what I have done, and then try to formulate a pitch. Uh, Now, what do I mean by a pitch? A pitch is what we generally call an elevator pitch. Basically, is to try to sell your campaign, or try to sell the adventure module to your group. Now, this might sound a little counterintuitive, in the sense that, like, if the group already knows about the adventure module, they kind of know what to expect from the adventure module. So why do you need to like sell it to them what they already know? Well, generally, why I say you need to do this, or why I think it's worth doing, is because that once you've done the breakdown, and like I said, it's when you've taken it as a framework, and you've put in your twist and your style or your ideas into it already, it generally becomes a different game than what your players might expect from reading, the back cover of the adventure module. So that is where you need to inform your players, or you need to set the expectation to you and your group about what this adventure module means to you, or what you have done to the adventure module that your players will need to know. This is more like a setting of expectations. This is more like the things that you open up to discuss in session 0. But why you need to do a pitch is because this is going to be like a good baseline for you to work with. Like, Out of the Abyss can be run in many different ways. It can be a very wild adventure, or it can be a very dark horror survival adventure. So which direction I wanted to take uh, was going to be what I would have pitched to my group. I could have pitched my group, okay, do you want to play Out of the Abyss like it was Alice in Wonderland, or do you want to play Out of the Abyss like as so it was like Dark Souls? So that's the kind of expectation. That's the kind of expectations you want to set with, like, after doing all your work, all the things that you've done before you want to run the adventure. And after you've done the pitch is very just the baseline. After you've done the pitch, the next thing you want to do is just listen to your players, listen to their feedback, listen to their interests. You've done the pitch. What do they think? Were they in? Are they out? Or do they not like a certain direction that you're going? Do they not like a certain twist that you've done to the adventure? Do they not like a certain, maybe there's something entirely that they didn't like about the whole adventure itself, and they would propose something else, and then they say, can we change that adventure to suit something more into along this particular mold that they want? And that's something, that you definitely open yourself up to. Like, the pitch is not really the final say. The pitch is just the initial talk, the the icebreaker, if you will. Like, okay, this is the game that I want to play. What do you guys think? And after you listen to the feedback, try to identify the places that okay, if they didn't like a particular part of your pitch, is that part of the pitch adjustable to you? Are you okay to change it to suit your players? So these are, once you identify all these points, these are the points that you bring up, to talk about in session 0. And definitely, like, it would, if there's a change in expectations of what you wanted to run and what they wanted to play, yeah, talk it out in session 0 and just figure it out. And these are all the things that the sort of work that you can put in to make your money's worth for running a publish adventure module. And I think, having learned all this and trying to practice it myself, all this in mind, I feel that I used to think that adventure mod the one of the purpose of adventure modules is to give everyone like a shared experience. Like, if I run out the abyss for group A and group B and group C, everyone was supposed to have the same experience, after they've gone through it, and they will like share stories among themselves and memories, like, oh, did you go to that part when they were in Blingdenstone and to fight the were-rats, or did you go to Blingdenstone and talk to the were-rats, or you make peace with the were-rats? Yeah, I thought that was the intentional purpose of publish adventure modules, but I've eventually come to learn that once I accepted them as a framework, and basically it's a framework to customize and to build a very specific, unique experience for a particular group, that memory stays with that group by themselves. It's not really to create like a communal memory of a particular adventure module. Sure, I mean, like, there are definitely some highlights, or there are some major set pieces within adventure module that would be usually but that most people would go through, or most people should go through. But I think it's, as a DM, especially for me as a DM, I feel it's more important that they create a memory that is more important to them, rather than to a memory that's shared by everybody that is just meh. Like, oh, if I had ran out of the abyss and I didn't do a great job about it, and everyone who played out of the abyss with me would say, oh yeah, the DM who ran out of the abyss, and then generally the whole adventure was just meh. Uh, and 3 groups saying it's meh, but if I did put the work in and I get one group that says meh and 2 other groups that says they had a really great time with it, I rather take 2 people who had great time with it, who had a totally different experience from each other, but they had a great time, and that's why I think it's more important to me as a DM. So I hope all this is going to be helpful and useful to DMs who are picking up adventure modules, and they may have certain expectations or preconceived notions about what adventure modules should do, but uh, take what I've shared here, maybe as advice, maybe as warning, or maybe as ideas or inspiration to how you want to do, how do you want to run adventure modules from D&D 5e. So that's all I have for now. I'll probably be sharing a lot more about some ideas about running adventure modules in the future, because I plan to run a, a few of them, just that not in the nearest sense. But these are the things that I definitely have internalized, and I will be carrying forward when I start running those future adventure modules in the meantime. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit long, but I hope someone's gonna pick up something from it, or if you didn't like it, you can just tell me in the comments as well. That's the whole point of it. So that'll be all for tonight. So this is the Questing GM signing out. Bye.